Bhagavatam Grantharaj ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya yato nivayad itaratas charte swavigyaswarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vayaditaratas chate swavigyaswarat.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Atsuraya.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Mujanti Jasuraya.
Tijo Varimedam Yata Vimni Matra Jisargom Isha.
Tejo Varimrita Jata Vinimajo Jatra Trisargomisya.
Damna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirahastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause behind him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It's he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate on him because he is the absolute
Dharma
truth.
projita, kaitravota.
Dharma projita kaitavotra.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Vedyam vastavamatra vastu.
Vedyam vastavamatra vastu.
Shivadam tapatrayon mulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayomulanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni krite.
Kimva parir ishwaraha.
Kimva paririshvara.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra.
Sadyo rudya avarudyate tra.
Kriti bihi subhistakshadat.
Kritibhi shubhistat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
This Bhagavat Puran propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpator galitam phalam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya sangitam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasamalayam.
Muhur ahorasika bhuvibhavakaha.
Muhur ahorasika bhuvibhavaka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
Mature fruit, the desired tree of Vedic literature.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was all relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shrambantam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hirnyantaksto Hi Abhadrani,
Vidyantastu Hi Abhadrani,
Vidunoti Suhitsatam.
Vidunati Surit
To hear
Satam.
about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or
literatures,
to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad
is
Gita,
itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies his body who is constantly engaged in hearing from him.
Nastapresu abhadresu
Nasta Praishwa Bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develop his dormant transcendental.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees,
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tada Rajastamo Bhava
kamalobodayaschaye
Kamalobhadayaschaye
chite taranavidam
Chitaiteranabhidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Sitam Sadve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of ignorance.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And this material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasanna manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangha Sajayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When those impurities are
the
wiped,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate Hridaya Granthis
siddhyante sarvasamsaya,
Chidyante Savasamshaya
siyante chasya karmani,
Jiyante Sachakarmani
jista evatmanishvare.
Druta Evadmanishvari.
Thus Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the hard knot of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram,
and enables one to come at one to the stage of assumption,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or in Krishna
can
consciousness
one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science.
Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse number 4. Satyam shito kim kashipo prayaser
Satyam Kito Kim Kashipo Prayase
baho swasidhe he upabar hanai kim.
Bahao Swasidhe Yapa Bhadane Kim
Satyanjalo kim purudana patria
Satyanjalo Kim Purudhana Patya
digvala lado satikim dukulai.
Digval Kaladho Shatikim Dukulai.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. When there are ample earthly flats to lie on, what is the necessity of cots and beds? When one can use his own arms, what is the necessity of a pillow? When one can use the palms of his hands, what is the necessity of varieties of utensils? When there is ample covering, or the skins of trees, what is the necessity of clothing? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The necessities of life for the protection and comfort of the body must not be unnecessarily increased. Human energy is spoiled in a vain search for such illusory happiness. If one is able to lie down on the floor, then why should one endeavor to get a good bedstead or soft cushion to lie on? If one can rest without any pillow and make use of the soft arms endowed by nature, there is no necessity of searching after a pillow. If we make a study of the general life of the animals, we can see that they have no intelligence for building big houses, furniture, and other household paraphernalia, and yet they maintain a healthy life by lying down on the open land. They do not know how to cook or prepare foodstuffs, yet they still live healthy lives more easily than the human being. This does not mean that human civilization should revert to animal life, or that the human being should live naked in the jungles without any culture, education, and sense of morality. An intelligent human cannot live the life of an animal. Rather, man should try to utilize his intelligence in arts and science, poetry, and philosophy. In such a way, he can further the progressive march of human civilization. But here the idea given by Srila Sukadeva Goswami is that the reserve energy of human life, which is far superior to that of animals, should simply be utilized for self-realization. Advancement of human civilization must be towards the goal of establishing our lost relationship with God, which is not possible in any form of life other than the human. One must realize the nullity of material phenomenon, considering it a passing phantasmagoria, and must endeavor to make a solution to the miseries of life. Self-complacence with a polished type of animal civilization geared to sense gratification is delusion, and such a civilization is not worthy of the name. In pursuit of such false activities, human beings in the clutches of Maya or illusion, in pursuit of such false activities, a human being is in the clutches of Maya or illusion. Great sages and saints in the days of yore were not living in palatial buildings furnished with good furniture and so-called amenities of life. They used to live in huts and groves and sit on the flat ground, and yet they have left immense treasures of high knowledge with all perfection. Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami were high-ranking ministers of state, but they were able to leave behind them immense writings on transcendental knowledge while residing only for one night underneath one tree. In other words, they would move to another tree every night. They did not live even 2 nights under the same tree. And what to speak of well-furnished rooms with modern amenities. And still, they were able to give us most important literatures of self-realization. So-called comforts of life are not actually helpful for progressive civilization. Rather, they are detrimental to such progressive life. In the system of Sanatana Dharma, of 4 divisions of social life and 4 orders of progressive realization, there are ample opportunities and sufficient directions for a happy termination of the progressive life, and the sincere followers are advised therein to accept a voluntary life of renunciation in order to achieve the desired goal of life. If one is not accustomed to abiding by the life of renunciation and self-abnegation from the beginning, one should try to get into the habit at a later stage of life, as recommended by Srila Sukadeva Goswami, and that will help one to achieve the desired success. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Well, this theme is coming back over and over again in this section of the Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad Gita, and in earlier first canto also. That is, simple living, high thinking. Complicated living, low thinking. So we have to make a decision. We want to stay on a low level or we want to stay on a high level. One time on this video made in the first temple, Matchless Gifts, one devotee who later on became Achyutananda Swami, he was a hippie at that time. In fact, everyone in the first temple were hippies. And the person who was making the video asked him, well, what is this Krishna consciousness? And he said, Krishna consciousness is living on the high level, maintaining a low level. And material life is living on a low level, maintaining a high level. I think I'm paraphrasing it. I might not have it exactly right. No, what he meant was that although in Krishna consciousness we sit on the floor, they were sitting on the floor, we share our food, they were sharing prasadam, and eating simply, dal, rice, sabji, roti. And sleeping on the floor, they were all sleeping on the floor, right? So he said they were living on a high level, although they were on a low level. So the low level meaning their life was austere, but yet they were being introduced to the Krishna conscious philosophy and lifestyle by Srila Prabhupada. And the materialists, they live on a low level, maintaining a high level of life. So they have a lot of amenities. Amenities means things that make your life so-called easier, but actually complicate your life because there's a lot of maintenance involved and things always going wrong, machines breaking down, cars breaking down, there's windstorms and electricity doesn't work, this thing, that thing, all the time there's some problem. So the low level of living is living in the midst of all those gadgets, and just like you have the bed. So nowadays, to get one of those high-tech beds, it could cost like $5,000. And you can adjust the hardness or softness of the bed, and you can do it on both sides of the bed. So if the wife is sleeping on one side, she can make it softer. If the husband's sleeping on the other side, he can make it harder. All that nonsense. Why should you spend $5,000 for a bed, right? One time, there was this, I was lecturing, I was talking like this about how people today are inspired to buy things that they don't need. And the example I gave was this advertisement that I saw on television of a special chair. And this special chair, you sit down on it, and then you have a control button. You press the button, and the chair goes zzz, and it makes your feet come up. And in the advertisement, when there's a lady and she goes zzz, and her feet comes up, she gets a big smile. And then she goes zzz, and then her feet come down, and then she loses the smile. And I said, this is an example of complete nonsense product, and it's expensive. It costs hundreds of dollars to get that chair to go like that. And everyone laughed a little bit, just like you're laughing a little bit now. But one lady was laughing hysterically. So after everybody else stopped laughing, she continued to laugh. So I was a little surprised. So I waited till she stopped laughing. I said, Mrs. So-and-so, I said, why are you laughing? And she said, my husband just bought that chair. Well, you see, that's the whole point. You buy things that you don't really need, but the publicity is so good, and the promise of improved sense gratification or increased sense gratification convinces people to buy all these useless things. It's just like, when someone gets married, they get about 4 ice cream making machines, and they never use them at all. Any of you ever get an ice cream making machine? No? No? No. You'll have to get married again to get one. Yeah, I mean, it's useless machine, right? Okay, so this seems to be very severe, when there are ample earthly flats to lie on, what is the necessity of cots and beds? Well, Prabhupada had a bed. You can see his bed in Mayapur. But it was basically a piece of wood, right? And it was a little bit above the level of the floor, and there's a very, very thin mattress. In fact, there might not even have been a mattress, just a sheet. And that was his bed. And he did not have a bathroom. He had to walk to the bathroom that was outside his room. And he didn't have a lot of furniture. He just had one chair and one table, and on the table were his deities. There was a deity of Lord Chaitanya. You can see that today. And actually, there were actually 2 small rooms. One where he would sit down to give darshan. People could come sit on a mat and talk to him, and he had his books there, and that's where he stayed up at night in the very early morning, translating. And then the other room was where he had the flat wooden bed, and he would sleep there and had his deity right next to him. Okay, so that's extremely simple for a person who's the founder and manager of a gigantic movement with hundreds of temples and thousands of devotees. That's the way he lived. Okay, so, and he gives the example of the Goswamis, who were, especially Sanatana Rupa Goswami, they were chief ministers in the government of Nawab Hussain Shah in Bengal. And Bengal is a very rich place, a very wealthy place. It's always been a wealthy place. But yet they gave everything up, and everything means everything. They gave everything up and lived like paupers in Vrindavan, not even sleeping under the same tree every night. And even though they built big temples, they didn't sleep in the temples. They continued to live under the trees, and all the time they were hardly sleeping 1, 2, or 3 hours a day, and they were involved intensely in discussing and writing about the transcendental pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So this whole way of life, and obviously they were living with poor people. The people in Vrindavan at that time, and Vrindavan was not a city, it was not a town. It was just paddy fields, rice fields and wheat fields. And people were, they didn't even know. Only the local residents knew that this place had something to do with Krishna. But Lord Chaitanya specifically sent the Goswamis there to excavate the places of Krishna's pastimes and to develop the place, and also write these transcendental literatures that they wrote, like Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, and so many books that they wrote. And they had to write them on special leaves. And they still have some of those original manuscripts. There's a museum, Vaishnava museum in Vrindavan, where they keep some of those original manuscripts written by the Goswamis. So, what Prabhupada says here, one must realize the nullity of the material phenomenon, considering it a passing phantasmagoria, and must endeavor to make a solution to the miseries of life. Self-complacence with a polished type of animal civilization geared to sense gratification is delusion, and such a civilization is not worthy of the name. Well, what's the difference between an illusion and a delusion? There is a difference between those two words. So an illusion is a mistake that you make due to imperfect senses of either hearing or seeing. So you make a mistake, and when you believe that the mistake is true, then you're in a state, that's an illusion. And then when you act as if that mistake is true, right, that's called acting in a state of delusion, right? So just like thinking, I am this body, and this body was born in North India, and we do things like this and like that, and you go through a whole thing based on the body, and then acting like that, right? Like, for example, in the we read every day the Ramcharitmanas, and in there it says that just like you beat a drum, you should beat your wife also. This is what we do. This is our culture. Well, wait a minute. It doesn't sound very nice, does it? No, we have the Shastra, we have the Ramcharitmanas. So this is all illusion, right? And therefore, in a state of, when you act on that illusion, that illusory false knowledge, you're in a deluded state. Or in other words, everyone's crazy. One time there was a man living in the country, and there was an announcement that on such and such a day, all the water in that country is going to change. And whoever drinks it, they will change with it. So that day came, and everyone drank the water because they wanted change. Just like everyone votes for somebody because they want change. Right? So they got the change. They all went crazy. But one guy, he purposely did not drink the water. But then, as time passed, he got really lonely because he was the only guy that was sane. Everybody else was crazy. So he decided to drink the water also and join everyone else. So everyone's in a state of delusion. It's acting in a state of delusion, believing things that are not true. But because there's so many of them, we decide to join them and drink the water and go crazy also, right? So this is what's happening. People come from India, and in their family they were trained to be Vaishnavas, and they come to America and they see, everybody is drinking wine, everybody is this, everyone is that, doing all these things, they're eating meat and smoking marijuana, and I don't want to say all the things they do now. So then they think, well, when in Rome, do as the Romans. So when in Seattle, do as the Seattleans. So they start drinking and going to bars and philandering and eating meat and all the good stuff of America. So it's the same thing as that man who, felt lonely because, everybody else was crazy. He wasn't crazy. So he decided to drink the water and go crazy also. So this is called peer pressure. Peer pressure. And this is what happens to kids in school. they're sitting in the lunchroom, and their new friends are eating meat, and they say, "Well, hey, what's the matter with you? Are you sick? You're not eating meat?" And he said, "No, I'm a vegetarian." "What? You're a what? A vegetarian? What? That only sick people do that, you know? You don't know how good this meat tastes. It's yummy, you know, and it makes you really, you know, strong." So after a little while, you know, the kid feels like, I don't want to be Indian. I don't want to be a vegetarian. You know, this is. I want to be one of the group here. You know, they're always looking down on me. I feel embarrassed to say I'm a vegetarian. I feel embarrassed to say I'm Indian or Hindu. Everybody else is Christian or atheist. So you see, it's called peer pressure. And it's very powerful influence on people. So, but look what Prabhupada is saying here. I mean, one must realize the nullity of the material phenomenon, considering it a passing phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria means a big show of illusion. Just like you go to see a magic show, and then there's the magician, and there's two very lovely ladies, and a big box. So they put the magician into the box, and on one side are his feet, and the other side is his head, and the rest of the body is in the box. And then they get a big saw, and they saw the box in half, and then they open the two halves. And then they close the curtain, and then all of a sudden, in a few seconds, they open the curtain, and there's the magician jumping up and down, and everyone is just amazed, you know, they clap like this, you know, because they actually saw the man cut in half. They saw the two halves of the box separated, right? And his feet were on one side and his head was on the other side. Well, that's why they call magicians illusionists. They create an illusion, and you see, I saw it with my own eyes. He was cut in half. I saw the ladies cutting him in half with the saw, right? But yet he's up, jumping up and down after they closed and opened the curtain. So we're all living in a state of a phantasmagoria. Is that illusion? It's fantastic. It's unbelievable. Well, if it's unbelievable, why are you going to believe it then, right? So this is what's happening, you know. And Prabhupada says, such a civilization is not worthy of the name. In pursuit of such false activities, a human being is in the clutches of Maya or illusion. Great sages and saints in the days of yore, that means in the past, were not living in palatial buildings furnished with good furniture and so-called amenities of life. They used to live in huts and groves, meaning like gardens or places where there's a lot of trees, and sit on the flat ground, and yet they have left immense treasures of high knowledge with all perfection. Well, this seems pretty austere, but actually Prabhupada gave the example. Yeah, he did live in a building, the Mayapur building. He did have to share the bathroom. Well, actually, we were not allowed to use his bathroom, but it was a public bathroom, right? There was on one side of the building where Prabhupada was living on the second floor. That was considered Prabhupada's bathroom, so we wouldn't use it, right? They use it today, but then we wouldn't use it. But then on the other side of the same floor was another bathroom, and that's where the devotees went. But it was the same bathroom, you know, it was a very simple bathroom, you know, and the water was not always hot. It was often cold. And sometimes there were snakes in the toilet, you know, and it wasn't a sitting toilet, you know, it was the Indian toilet. And, but yet, Prabhupada was there, and his room was real simple, hardly any furniture at all. So he gave the example himself, and his possessions, what did he just had books. He had one or two dhotis, and he had his tiffin and a plate and a spoon, and that was it. That was it. He didn't have much more than that. His beads, of course. So, but look what he did. He produced so many books, over 150 books, and he spread the movement in 11 years, and then he left, right? He left. So, and we're still following what he's done, and we're still amazed by what he did and his example. So, such a life, there's a word for it. We're saying, simple living, high thinking. But there was a philosophy in ancient Greece and later on in Rome called Stoicism. And it's a very interesting philosophy, S-T-O-I-C-I-S-M, Stoicism. And what is it? It says, the endurance of pain or hardship without display of feelings and without complaint. Well, is it a hardship to sleep on the floor? Well, if you're used to sleeping on a soft bed, yes. You know. Is it a hardship not having a pillow but just using your arm? Yeah, for some people it would be a severe hardship. And how about just wearing very simple clothing made from the bark of trees or from leaves or something like that? Well, that would be a real austerity. But nowadays, especially for women, the clothing hardly covers their bodies anymore, right? So, and it's very tight. So that must be even harder than having like loose-fitting leaves or bark. So the clothing is getting more severe and limited in scope. But anyway, so this patience, forbearance, and lack of protest, lack of complaint, fortitude, endurance, acceptance of the inevitable, philosophicalness, impassivity, dispassion, imperturbability, calmness, coolness, solidness, and unflappability. All these adjectives are related to Stoicism. And it's an ancient Greek school of philosophy founded at Athens by Zeno of Cittium. The school taught that virtue, the highest good, is based on knowledge. The wise live in harmony with the divine reason, called the Logos. The Logos is a word they use a lot in philosophy. And it's all coming from the Greeks. Also identified with fate and providence that governs nature and are indifferent to the vicissitudes, meaning the changes of fortune, and to pleasure and pain. Did you hear the name Krishna in that explanation of Stoicism? No. The closest you came was divine reason. So divine means sacred or spiritual reason. But it's not identified with a person. It's just divine reason, right? Or providence or fate. What are the beliefs of Stoicism? Stoicism teaches the development of self-control and fortitude as a means of overcoming destructive emotions. The philosophy holds that becoming a clear and unbiased thinker allows one to understand the universal reason, Logos. Do you hear anything about Krishna there or God? No. What it means to be a Stoic. Being Stoic is being calm and almost without any emotion. When you're Stoic, you don't show what you're feeling, and you also accept whatever is happening. The noun Stoic is a person who is not very emotional. The adjective Stoic describes a person, action, or thing that seems emotionless and almost blank. You hear anything about God there? No. You see, the farther west you go from India, the more impersonal it becomes, right? And this idea of living frugally and controlling your emotions, and I mean, it's all coming from India, but it's everything minus Krishna, you see. And And this is the general theme of philosophy in the West. It's always minus Krishna, or some philosophized Krishna that's not really Krishna. It's something they're imagining. And then it says, what is Stoicism in simple terms? Stoicism is a school of philosophy that hails from ancient Greece and Rome in the early parts of the 3rd century before Christ. It is a philosophy of life that maximizes positive emotions, reduces negative emotions, and helps individuals to hone their virtues of character. The goal of Stoicism is to attain inner peace by overcoming adversity, practicing self-control, being conscious of our impulses, realizing our ephemeral nature, and the short time allotted. These were all meditative practices that helped them live with their nature and not against it. Wow, that sounds good, right? But there's no Krishna there at all. And actually, although there's some vestiges of goodness, it is actually a very boring way of life and not very practical. So, you see, this is what happens when you water something down. You end up with something that is boring and not practical. Although it talks about developing virtue, developing goodness, and so forth, and not being disturbed in difficult situations. But it's not positive. It's a negative way of doing it. It's just like Kamsa was always thinking of Krishna, but trying to kill him. How to kill Krishna. So he was Krishna conscious, but not in a favorable way. And this Stoicism has elements of the mode of goodness in it, but it's not pure goodness. It's mundane goodness, and it's sort of counterproductive, because one becomes eventually negative instead of positive about life. Okay, so, and then there's another point. Like, for example, there was one associate of Lord Chaitanya called Sridhara Kolavecha. And he was a very poor Brahmana. And he made a living by selling banana leaf and banana bark cups and plates. And also he would sell some vegetables and fruits and flowers. He had just like a little cloth, so he would sit down on the ground, open his cloth, and there'd be maybe one squash and a banana or two, and then there's little cups and plates made from banana bark or banana leaves that he would sew, and then people would buy them. And he hardly made, I don't know, 5 annas a day, and anna is like what we would consider a penny. And half of what he made every day he would donate to worship Ganga Devi, because he was living right there in Mayapur area, or Navadvip. And the other half he would live with it. And so he had he only had one cloth, one old discolored dhoti. But he was very clean. He would bathe every day in the Ganges. And he had a broken, sort of a cracked iron pot that he kept water in. So every day Lord Chaitanya would come to meet him, and he would purposely steal some of his fruits or squashes or things like that. And then the Kolavecha would say, well, why are you doing that? I'm a poor man. He said, it tastes better when I steal it. So they had this relationship going. And Lord Chaitanya would always come to drink some water from his broken iron pot. So, but this Kolavecha, he was actually a pure devotee of the Lord. And the Lord would come to see him whenever he was in the vicinity. He would always come to see him and steal something from him and joke with him. And they had a very intimate relationship. And when the Lord Chaitanya started the Sankirtan movement, Kolavecha was there dancing in ecstasy every time he would see the Sankirtan party come by. So this is a person who is poor, but yet the Lord comes to see him every day. And they have this very, very intimate relationship with each other. So this is something exceptional that we see. And Prabhupada is saying here, he says, in the system of Sanatana Dharma, 4 divisions of social life and 4 orders of progressive realization, there are ample opportunities and sufficient directions for a happy termination of the progressive life, and the sincere followers are advised therein to accept a voluntary life of renunciation. A voluntary life of renunciation. That means you can have a house, you can have a car, you can have a business, or you can have a profession, but you should use all these things in Krishna's service. And if you don't know how to do that, you get advice from genuine Shiksha and Diksha gurus, how to use these things in Krishna's service. So that's the renunciation part. You're renouncing using these things for sense gratification, and you're accepting to use them only in the service of Krishna. Right? That way you don't drink the funny water and become crazy like everybody else. And then it says, the sincere followers are advised therein to accept a voluntary life of renunciation in order to achieve the desired goal of life, which is Krishna Pumartha Mahan. In other words, attaining pure love of Krishna and sharing it with others. If one is not accustomed to abiding by the life of renunciation and self-abnegation, meaning you deny yourself all these amenities of life in order to gain time to practice spiritual life. And it says, so if you're not abiding by a life of renunciation and self-abnegation from the beginning, one should try to get into the habit at a later stage of life as recommended by Srila Sukadeva Goswami, and that will help one to achieve the desired success. So you might go through a period, just like I started out as a brahmachari when I was like 22 years old, or 21 years old, right after it was 1 year after I graduated college. So when I became a brahmachari, I was sleeping on the floor. In fact, we had a temple in Paris. I would sleep on the floor right in front of the entrance of the toilet. That way, I would get woken up early in the morning. So when the pujaris would come in, they'd have to, wake me up to move over because I was blocking the door. And that way I would wake up early. And then, and I didn't mind doing it because I wanted to wake up early. And then, and I just had one or two dhotis, that was it, in my bead bag, and a torn shirt, I remember that. And my glasses were broken, so one side was a string to hold it onto my ear. And I was happy. I was very, very happy, and went like that for a year or two. And actually I was a brahmachari for 4.5, 5 years. So then when I got married, then, I tried to get nicer clothes, and had to rent an apartment, and have a car, start a business, and, I got really entangled. And I remember when my wife and I moved into our apartment, we had nothing in the apartment. There was not even pots or pans, anything. But when we had our first kid, I had to buy some things like that. And then when my wife was pregnant with a second child, then she said, we should move to a bigger place, because it was a one-room apartment, it was very small. I said, okay. So everything we had, we were able to fit into our car. And then we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. And then when the third child came, my wife said, this is too small, we should get a bigger place. I said, okay. So we got a bigger apartment, but this time we had to rent a truck to move everything we had. and we moved into a bigger apartment. And then when the fourth child came, she said, "Look, it's too small here. You know, we should get a place with a yard. You know." I said, "Okay." So this time we had to hire a company to move everything. We had so many things, you know. And I said, "Well, we don't really need all these things." "What do you mean we don't need it?" "Of course we need these things." I said, "Okay, but it's just junk." She said, No. You think it's junk, but we need it. So we had to, instead of throwing things away, we moved everything. And then we had a house with a yard and everything. And then the fifth and sixth kids came, and we had to get a bigger house, right? This time, like, it was a big thing, you know. It was a big truck. Big moving truck, you know, with 2 or 3 people there carrying all the stuff, you know. And I said to my wife, "Is this stuff we had when we were in, you know, in a small apartment?" He said, No, it's all necessary." I said, "What do you mean it's necessary? We never use it." No, you have to take it." So what happened? We just kept increasing junk, right? And we were attached to it, so we couldn't dump it, right? So that's what material life is. It's just increasing things, right? But then, you know, as the kids grow older and then eventually they leave, then you can downsize and go back to, you know, sleeping on the floor in front of the toilet. So you get woken up early in the morning. So this is a type of stoicism, you know, but it's a spiritual stoicism where Krishna is the center of life. That's the whole point. So we don't want to, so there's a difference now between what's called knowledge and wisdom. Because in the beginning we have knowledge. Knowledge is an accumulation of facts. But wisdom is knowing how to use all those facts correctly and perfectly to attain a positive result. And a positive result is becoming Krishna. Just having a lot of knowledge without wisdom is basically useless. But when you have knowledge and wisdom and you know how to use that knowledge correctly, that is real life. So unless we regularly hear, so you don't get wisdom by just collecting knowledge, accumulating knowledge. You get it by hearing Srimad Bhagvatam and Bhagavad Gita on a daily basis and going out on Sankirtan and preaching. Then that knowledge becomes realized and you know how to use it correctly in every situation. So that's why we read something yesterday like that where Prabhupada said that he says, number one, if there's difficulty in plain living and high thinking, he will not budge even an inch. No, the Transcendentalist is specifically warned herewith to be fixed in mind, so that even if there is difficulty in plain living and high thinking, he will not budge even an inch from his stark determination. For a Transcendentalist, it is a suicidal policy to be intimately in touch with the sense gratifiers of the world, because such a policy will frustrate the ultimate gain of life. Sukadeva Goswami met Maharaj Pariksit when the latter felt a necessity for such a meeting. It is the duty of a Transcendentalist to help persons who desire real salvation and to support the cause of salvation. One might note that Sukadeva Goswami never met Maharaj Pariksit while he was ruling as a great king. For a Transcendentalist, the mode of activities is explained in the next sloka, where it says, what's the need of a bed when you can lay down on the ground? And why do you need, and when you have your arm, why do you need a pillow? And when one can use the palms of his hands, what is the necessity of a variety of utensils and so forth? So now he's explaining, Sukadeva Goswami is explaining to Maharaj Pariksit, he said, look, now, at least now that you're no longer going to be the king and you only have 7 days to live, you should completely renounce all this nonsense and just focus on your relationship with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nandi Hari Bol. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Hari Bol.
There is a YouTube video on Prabhupada's room.
You- Oh, yeah? You
Watched it last night.
you watched it last night?
Yeah.
Was it how I described
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Some, live in Mayapur, some channel is there.
Yeah. You can see how simply Prabhupada lived. I mean, it's very, it was austere, but yet it was minimal. I mean, it's not that he was torturing himself, you know. It was decent, very decent.
They showed only one room.
There are two rooms, but both rooms are small. Yeah. One room where he's sitting in his low desk,
Yeah, and then
has his books, and people can sit down on some type of a cushion and have darshan. And then the other room is his bedroom, with just a flat wooden plank.